August 11th, 2025, Sunday morning, China's State Flood Control and Drought Relief Headquarters activates Level 4 emergency response for Sichuan Province. 5 days later, August 16th, Friday evening, a beer festival truss collapses in Mianzhu city during severe weather. 2 dead. 3 critically injured, same province, same week, same systemic failure. This isn't about floods anymore. It's about an 83 million person laboratory for testing whether human systems can adapt faster than they're breaking down. Welcome back to Earth's Dark Secrets. What I'm about to reveal shows how Sichuan Province became ground zero for a terrifying experiment. What happens when emergency management becomes the primary mode of governance? August 9th to 11th, 2025. Heavy to torrential rainfall was forecast across the Sichuan Basin, prompting the emergency activation. But what the official reports don't emphasize is that this Level 4 response came just days after previous emergency protocols had been maintained across multiple regions. China's Ministry of Water Resources had already activated Level 4 flood control emergency responses for 5 provincial-level regions, as intense rainfall was predicted to batter Henan, Hubei, Chongqing, Sichuan, Shanxi, Anhui, and Gansu. Level 4 is supposed to represent moderate emergency conditions on China's 4-tier response system. But when 7 provinces simultaneously require emergency protocols, the definition of moderate becomes meaningless. Emergency response was activated at 3 p.m. local time on Saturday, with work teams dispatched to assist local authorities. The logistical reality is huge here. China's emergency management apparatus is now running continuous operations across nearly a third of its territory. Infrastructure equation. Sichuan Province encompasses 486,000 square kilometers and houses 83 million people. Every emergency activation affects an area larger than Sweden with a population equivalent to Germany. The mathematics of disaster response at this scale reveals something disturbing. Traditional emergency management assumes brief, localized disruptions to normal operations. But Sichuan is experiencing continuous emergency conditions where normal no longer exists. The National Observatory renewed yellow alerts for rainstorms from 8 a.m. Sunday to 8 a.m. Monday, across broad regions including Sichuan. This 24-hour cycle of alert renewals has become the standard operating procedure, not the exception. Consider the resource allocation. Each Level 4 response requires mobilization of meteorological monitoring systems, water resource management teams, emergency evacuation coordination, and infrastructure assessment crews. When these operations become continuous, the emergency response system itself becomes a permanent infrastructure component. Friday evening, August 16th. A truss mounted at a beer festival in Mianzhu collapsed following severe convective weather, killing 2 people and severely injuring 3 others. This incident reveals the deadly intersection between emergency weather conditions and temporary infrastructure decisions. The collapse occurred during severe weather conditions that prompted standard safety protocols. But as we all know, Mianzhu is located in Mianyang Prefecture, Mianzhu, within the same Sichuan Basin that had been under Level 4 emergency response just 5 days earlier. The beer festival proceeded despite ongoing severe weather warnings affecting the region. This literally exposes a fundamental contradiction in China's emergency management approach: emergency weather responses that maintain normal economic and social activities. The festival was an attempt to demonstrate regional normalcy while emergency protocols remained active. The truss failure wasn't a construction defect, oh no. It was a systemic failure where temporary structures designed for normal conditions were operated under emergency weather parameters. China's Ministry of Water Resources maintained Level 4 flood control emergency response for multiple provinces following heavy rainfall. The language is still bureaucratic, but the reality is meteorological chaos. The Sichuan Basin's geography creates a natural amphitheater that amplifies weather systems. Mountains surrounding the basin trap moisture-laden air masses. This simply creates conditions where moderate rainfall becomes torrential and brief storms become sustained precipitation events. This geographic vulnerability was known for centuries. What's new is the scale of human infrastructure that must now function within these extreme conditions. Traditional Sichuan architecture adapted to flood cycles through elevation, material selection, and settlement patterns. Modern infrastructure assumes controlled conditions that no longer exist. The meteorological data shows a pattern here. Extreme downpours creating sharp water level rises in the upper and middle reaches of the Yangtze River system. Every precipitation event tests not just local drainage capacity, but the entire integrated water management system across multiple provinces. Every day of Level 4 emergency response creates economic disruption that generates pressure to return to normal operations as quickly as possible. This creates a deadly cycle, if you are aware of it. Emergency conditions demand cautious infrastructure use, with economic pressures that encourage normal activity levels. The Mianzhu Beer Festival exemplifies this paradox. Local authorities faced a choice between canceling economic activity during ongoing emergency conditions or accepting increased risk by maintaining normal operations under abnormal circumstances. They chose economic continuity. 2 people paid with their lives, and 3 others remained seriously injured. This pattern repeats across the whole Sichuan. Emergency protocols coexist with normal economic expectations, creating scenarios where people must find emergency conditions while maintaining standard activity levels. There's something unprecedented in Chinese emergency management history: system saturation, where emergency response becomes the baseline operational mode. When emergency management transitions from exception to routine, several critical changes occur. The psychological impact on populations shifts from acute stress during brief emergencies to chronic stress under continuous uncertainty. People lose the ability to distinguish between genuine emergency conditions and administrative emergency protocols. Resource allocation becomes permanently diverted from development and maintenance to crisis response. Infrastructure improvement projects are delayed while emergency response consumes available resources. Decision-making processes become reactive rather than strategic, as continuous emergency conditions prevent long-term planning and force constant short-term adaptations. What makes Sichuan's situation genuinely terrifying is that every emergency response cycle reduces the system's capacity to handle the next crisis. Emergency evacuations disrupt local knowledge networks where residents understand their environment's specific risks and capabilities. Rapid infrastructure repairs prioritize immediate function over long-term resilience. Emergency resource allocation depletes reserves needed for comprehensive upgrades. The result is a feedback loop where each emergency response makes the next emergency more likely and more severe. The Mianzhu incident is evidence of temporary structures operating under emergency weather conditions with normal safety expectations. But let's be honest, let's be real here. This same principle applies to permanent infrastructure throughout Sichuan. Heavy to torrential rainfall across the Sichuan Basin tests every bridge, road, building, and utility system that wasn't designed for current weather extremes. The probability mathematics are blunt. If weather events that exceed design specifications occur frequently enough, infrastructure failures become statistically inevitable rather than exceptional. Traditional risk management assumes that extreme events are rare enough to represent acceptable risk levels. But when extreme events become routine, the entire risk calculation framework breaks down. Thankfully, emergency treatment saved the lives of 3 seriously injured victims from the Mianzhu collapse. But this successful medical response masks the broader human impact of continuous emergency conditions. Populations living under chronic emergency protocols experience sustained psychological stress that affects decision-making, social relationships, and economic behavior. The constant uncertainty about whether current conditions represent genuine emergency or administrative precaution creates a state of learned helplessness. Communities lose social cohesion when emergency evacuations and infrastructure failures disrupt traditional networks. Economic planning becomes impossible when emergency conditions can interrupt normal activity without warning. Weather forecasting models project that precipitation patterns, similar to the August 9th to 11th events, will continue affecting Sichuan throughout the remainder of 2025. Systems operating under chronic stress have reduced tolerance for additional stress. The geographic scope of simultaneous emergency responses suggests that China's emergency management capacity may be approaching absolute limits. The question isn't whether Sichuan can manage individual emergency events. The question is whether any system can function when emergency management becomes permanent governance. Maintaining Level 4 flood control emergency response for multiple provinces is a fundamental shift in how large-scale governance operates under climate uncertainty. This isn't disaster response anymore. Wake up. It's disaster-based governance where emergency protocols protocols become the standard framework for social and economic organization. Sichuan's floods revealed that China's most advanced emergency response capabilities are being used to manage failures in basic infrastructure resilience. The Level 4 activations, the continuous weather alerts, the emergency resource deployments, these represent sophisticated systems for managing predictable failures rather than preventing them. When emergency response becomes normal governance, the definition of both emergency and normal loses meaning. What remains is a population of 83 million people living in permanent uncertainty, where the next infrastructure failure is a question of when, not if. Thanks for watching Earth's Dark Secrets, where we expose the hidden realities behind our planet's most devastating disasters. If this investigation revealed something the mainstream media won't tell you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us uncover the stories that authorities don't want told. Hit the bell so you never miss our in-depth analysis of the disasters that reveal our planet's dark truths.